and welcome to the Open Book channel. My name is Oleander, your designated open book, and this is where I share my journey as an author, talk about the craft of writing, the business of being a content creator, and occasionally review books. Today I wanted to talk a bit about audiobooks because I have experienced more of them recently than ever before, and it's led to some interesting revelations about the storytelling medium that I never thought I'd have. While I was working my full-time job over the summer, I picked up many audiobooks from my local library to listen to during the long, hot days. My go-to source for literature is the Libby app, if any of you are wondering. Aside from some annoying moments where it's gotten caught up due to online-offline save states, it's been great for being in places with no good internet connection because it does let you download the files, and I use my Sony headphones for noise canceling because the worksite can get very loud. Majority of the books I consume now are through audiobooks, and truly, I never thought that I'd be that kind of person. I started out on the pretentious side of audiobooks introduction, convinced it's not the same as reading, and it isn't quite the same, but it also isn't so different that it should be discredited as not consuming the media. It's still the same words, it's the same story. There is no other way that I'd manage to get through the dozens of books a year that I want, but now that I can listen to audiobooks at work while my hands are otherwise busy but my mind can roam, it's free real estate. Even on days that I'm not working, my eyes do get tired from screens, and I guess I'm getting old because physical books are becoming a burden on my wrists to have to hold for more than an hour at a time, so it's been so nice to get cozy, crawl in bed after a long day, and listen to an audiobook in the dark, which might sound a little depressing to some of you, but that's my new preference. Now that I'm a newly converted audiobook advocate, though, I've noticed some interesting things about how the experience changes based on the production and narrator, and also how much an audiobook can change my reception of the story itself. So to start, and what I think is pretty obvious, the narrator matters, but also not as much as you might think. To be fair, I haven't tried listening to a fully AI-narrated audiobook yet. That might be a hard line that can't be crossed, but I'll let you know how I feel about that when and if I ever get there. But I think that the human touch is probably a necessity. And actually, ironically enough, my audio comprehension isn't the best. I struggle with accents on phones and through conversations that I can't predict upcoming context, which is mostly why I never thought that I'd be such an avid audiobook listener. But as with all things, it gets better with time. The first audiobook you listen to will get easier to understand as you adapt to the narrator, and then every audiobook afterward will get easier too as you train your listening skills. I listen to almost all of my audiobooks on 1.25 speed now, actually, depending on the narrator, like whether they take really long pauses with sentences and stuff. What I didn't expect, though, was for so many audiobook narrators to sound the same. There is a variety of quality among them. Some have a way wider range of voices that they can do, emotions that they can tap into, but there's a particular niche of voice that dominates the sphere, and I often find myself wondering, oh, is this the same person that narrated this book or that book? And it usually turns out to be neither. So even in that, there is a familiarity that I've grown with the cadence among audiobook narrators that makes listening to them all the easier. So the narrators do matter, but I've also found that I'm willing to settle for less. Like, if anything, I've found that narrators have overdone their performance more than I've cared if they phoned it in. The most recent example would be The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn, narrated by Anne-Marie Lee. She undoubtedly captured the desperation of the protagonist, but that in turn meant that it was more apparent when the writing was a little too over-embellished. Which I found super interesting because in other cases, I'm certain that I excused the quality of writing and enjoyed a story much more because of the narrator in other cases. And I don't know, I find that so odd, isn't it? I mean, it is all based on my bias as a consumer, but last summer I listened to The Cruel Prince by Holly Black and gave it a surprisingly good review, but when I went to check others' opinions on Goodreads, one person was adamant about the overuse of the word I, and now, I get that's a pretty silly criticism for a novel in first-person POV. That said, the blatant use of it can be cut down with skill, And mostly, I was just shocked that because I'd listened to it through audiobook, I hadn't even really thought about it. The POV hadn't really registered because I wasn't the sole conduit for the text's presentation. I don't particularly love first-person POV, and I actively prefer third-person, but listening to stories through audiobook, I found that it matters much less, even improves the experience of first-person POV from what I think it would have been or how I would have felt about it if I was reading it. Taking everything I've said into consideration, I've been wondering whether the execution of an audiobook is influential enough to make it immoral to grade the story's quality on an audiobook alone. There are so many book-to-movie adaptations, and those can be wildly different, and should be, due to the strengths of the vastly different mediums, but we don't generally treat them as comparable. Movies are obviously going to have a million details that books don't because that's just the nature of visual storytelling. It can't suffer from white room syndrome like a piece of text can. But on the other hand, with audiobooks, we generally regard them on a much closer wavelength to the original text because it's only getting whatever extra sprinkle of flavor its narrator brings. And still, that can end up being monumental, and not even like, with me, in the awareness a reader gives to things, like which perspective it's being told in, but say, I saw some discourse online the other day about dialogue tags. Some people hate excessive or overexpressive tags, and as much as I'd argue a novel that completely limited itself to only said would get annoying, but if it's a narrator interpreting and giving all of the emotions we need, like the anger, the sass, the voice cracking, a totally mediocre book with no dialogue tags could transcend to greatness with that extra bit of help, don't you think? I'd love to hear in the comments below of any instances where you've compared an audiobook to a novel and whether your perception of it changed, or if you could discern why. Or please chime in with audiobooks that you think are truly worth listening to over reading and that I should go out of my way to pick up. I liked Legends and Lattes in text, but Travis Baldree quite literally changed how good I thought audiobook narration could be. I was so impressed, and I can't say that I'd have rather read it instead. Anyway, thanks for watching. Comment your thoughts below, like and subscribe if you enjoy the videos. If you want to support me or this channel, there's a link to my Ko-fi and Patreon in the description below. See you in the next video.